Hello, this is just giving you an update from Hanoi. It's the 6th of April, and it's Monday the 6th of April, and pretty much things haven't changed a great deal. The government did introduce slightly tighter restrictions on the 4th of April, and that has meant there's no taxis anymore to take people to the airport. There's no public transport at all. Domestic flights have all but diminished. I think there's one flight a day going from Hanoi down to Ho Chi Minh, so it's almost impossible to get that if you want to get that for a connecting flight. People are asked to stay at home and to, because of the isolating and social distancing requirements, and only to go to the shops, the supermarket if you need to buy food. The chemists are open, and the parks and gardens, people are asked not to walk. In fact, today we went to an airline office to organise some tickets, or try to organise tickets, and we were stopped by police. But one of the things we do is we've put in our phone, we've Google Translate from English to Vietnamese, and we wrote in this before we left home where we were going and why. So when we were stopped by the police, straight away we handed him our phone, he read it, he said, okay, and off you go. So that was fine. So for our situation, it definitely hasn't turned out to be the great trip around Southeast Asia that we had hoped, but like so many people, nobody would have expected the COVID-19 coronavirus to take hold the way that it has. When we came to Vietnam, we left Brisbane on the 1st of March, and when we arrived in Vietnam, I think I've mentioned this on previous videos, they had no active coronavirus cases. They had 16 cases, and all of those had been tested after they were fully recovered. And they went 3 weeks without having no active cases. So when we arrived in Hanoi at the very beginning of March, things were positive, everything was like normal, and we were having a fantastic time at the start of our holiday. It wasn't until about, I think, just after a week into our holiday when some people came, international flights, inbound flights into Vietnam, brought the virus with them, and it did spread a little. But, having said that, Vietnam the government has done an excellent job at containing the spread of this virus. As at today, there's 241 reported cases of the coronavirus, and of those 241, 90 have recovered. 90. So there's only there's 151 active cases, and that's throughout all of Vietnam. And Vietnam has a population of 97 million, so that's really well contained. So that's the situation here. As far as our situation goes, as soon as our government announced that things were getting much worse at home, things seemed to, it's a very fluid situation. Things were changing almost hourly, not daily. We were always up to date with the news and the Twitter and with our phones, and having, access to all the information that we needed to know exactly what was going on and what we needed to do. And once we realised that the situation at home was really deteriorating quickly, and their numbers of coronavirus cases were starting to rise rapidly, and our government advised Australians to come home, we made efforts, and we've continued to make efforts to come home. And we've done that by trying to secure international flights home. The problem that we've experienced, and so many other travellers experience, is that when you try to book your flights, you start doing the booking. Either the flight is cancelled or it books out as you're trying to do it. If you try to ring the customer care centre, you can never get through. You can ring 20, 30 times and never get through to talk to anyone, because there's such a massive demand for flights for people to return home right now. And so we've been down to Vietnam Airlines, to the actual office. They've been fantastic. They're open seven days a week, but they can't help us because we weren't able to secure a connecting flight from Ho Chi Minh, because there was a flight from Ho Chi Minh leaving to Australia last week, and our embassy made us aware of that flight. Vietnam Airlines sent me an email because I'd been emailing them, but it was no good because we needed a connecting flight to get to Ho Chi Minh and there wasn't one available, so we couldn't take that flight either. The other thing that we came across was straight after we received news from our government in Australia that a level 4 travel ban had been placed, then transit hubs around Southeast Asia closed quickly. And the transit hubs are places like Singapore, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Taipei, Hong Kong. All these places closed the airport, not just to international arrivals, but to transiting arrivals as well. And so any airline that we were trying to book with, whether it be Thai Airlines, Eva Airlines, Singapore Airlines, we couldn't fly with them. Cathay Pacific, we couldn't do it because we would not. They allow you to buy the ticket online. That's no problem. But then if we arrived at the airport at Hanoi, they would tell us you can't go on this flight because you're not allowed to transit in that country, whether it be Hong Kong or Bangkok, Hong Kong or Thailand or Malaysia or Singapore or Taiwan. So that's been the biggest problem. Those transit hubs closed very quickly, and that's been very stressful. You know, about 3 weeks ago, Qatar were offering flights for about $11,000 Australian for both Paul and I. And that flight meant we would have to catch a flight. In order to go home, we would have to catch a flight from Hanoi to Doha, have a 22-hour layover in Doha, and then go all the way from Doha in Qatar back to Australia. And that flight would take us to Sydney. We live in Brisbane, up north, and Sydney's down south, but that's okay. It would be in Australia, which would be great. But, you know, the price of those flights when they first launched them a couple of weeks ago, and the availability was scarce, and that 22-hour layover just really scared me, because from the flight from Hanoi to Doha, I know that I'll be with people that are leaving this, you know, has been a relatively controlled environment in Vietnam with so few cases. Like I said, 151 cases. Going to Doha, I know that everyone coming from this environment, they're all going to wear their masks and you know, will probably be fine on that flight. But, you know, to be in Doha airport for 22 hours with people that have come from flights all over the world, whether it be UK, Middle East, Europe, from possibly areas where the pandemic has really taken hold and is a real problem, you know, you could be in transit with carriers and you could end up on, those people are going to possibly come on the same flight as me to return home from Doha to Sydney. So that was a real issue for us as well. So we have been in contact with, as I said, with Vietnam Airlines, with numerous airlines, with the Australian Embassy both here in Hanoi, Foreign Affairs back in Australia. We have also sent emails to our local parliamentarian back home in Australia, who's made representations to our Foreign Affairs Minister on our behalf. So we have been very, very active in trying to secure flights. Do you know, this morning we woke up feeling quite good because on Friday we had booked a confirmed flight with Qatar. Not the ideal situation, the same scenario, a bit cheaper now, but but it's still a very, very expensive flight. And but it's a flight, it's a flight home, and they're the only airline now that are actually taking people back to Australia. But you have to go through Doha, and you have to go all the way back to Qatar and then come back to Australia. So we did secure that flight on Friday, and I was feeling quite stressed about it. The flight was leaving tomorrow night because we would have quite a long layover. Not as long as the original ones we looked at. So this layover was going to be, I think, about 11 hours or something like that. And so we had that all booked, and then woke up this morning, Paul received a phone call, and it was Qatar Airlines advising us that flight had been cancelled. And now we find ourselves, we have been rescheduled onto the last available flight to Australia from Hanoi, and it leaves on Thursday night. So fingers crossed that that's not cancelled, because every time we've tried to make a booking with Qatar, the flight has been cancelled or it has booked up really quickly. So we're really keeping our fingers crossed that we catch this flight. We always had the backup plan that if we were unable to secure a flight, we do have a longer visa than most people, and we could stay put for a while. But that's not an ideal situation. I mean, we would try and make the best of it if that's what we have to do, but that's not what our preference, I guess. In this current situation where you really are trapped, feel very much trapped in the apartment. So, and it's really felt like that the last couple of days since the 4th of April, since they brought all of that in. When we heard from Qatar this morning that they cancelled our flight, and they rescheduled on the spot, and you could tell the man was in a hurry, and he wanted to hurry. He's probably got 200 or 300 people or more that he has to ring and tell them that their flight's cancelled. So after that, we got on our computers and we tried to look for any other Qatar connections in Doha to Australia that we could get on, and we did find one in Perth that's only going to be 2.5 hours, I think, or 3.5 hours. And we thought, okay, so if we get there, 3.5 hours in transit, by the time you're actually transiting and getting on, it's actually not that long. And the risk of contracting anything, regardless, or even having to, be awake for so many hours, 3.5 hours seems like a dream. So we tried ringing and emailing Qatar, but of course they're overloaded, so we're not getting anywhere. So we quickly went down to the airline office for Qatar in Hanoi, and to do it in this current environment, it meant that we had to put a little message in our phone and with using Google Translate explaining that we were going to Qatar Airways head office to reschedule our flight. And in case we were pulled over by police, and we were asked by a policeman to come over and explain what we were doing, and we handed him our phone, and he was happy, and he said, okay, go. And so we went to the Qatar and to the office, and it was closed. So then we came back, and we have tried ringing them and emailing, and I did finally get through to someone at Qatar in Qatar. And they told me that they wouldn't be able to help me with changing that flight, that I need to wait until I'm within 48 hours of the flight, and they may be able to do something then, but I would have to ring back. Or I can just wait till I get to Doha and ask them to do it then. But, like in this kind of situation, you'd rather have everything kind of booked and confirmed in, wouldn't you? So I'll keep trying to contact them, as soon as that 48 hours hits anyway. I guess, who would have thought this situation would have developed the way that it has? It hasn't just affected tourists, it's affected, people's lives and people's health and people's employment and, economies all around the world, people's retirement, job security. it's been devastating for international students who find themselves now in countries where they're not offered their course. They don't have an income to support themselves. Their visas may not be valid or are running out. It's just a horrible situation for everyone. I do want to mention, I have seen, we do keep in contact with the media and everything back home in Australia, and we do read about there's been quite a strong sentiment about people on holidays overseas and they didn't come home when the government told them to, and now they can't get flights, and that it's their own fault or whatever. And I can say that I haven't seen firsthand in this current situation. I haven't seen people running around holidaying as if there's nothing going on right now. I have seen that it's exhausting constantly trying to ring customer care, of the airlines, and trying to make bookings, and booking and making payments of thousands of dollars only to have it cancelled. I know what that's like. Our consulate, our embassy here in Hanoi know me by first name. We're in constant contact, and this situation has developed so quickly. And people were caught off guard when the flights were available. Websites weren't, the internet and everything didn't cope with it. The airlines didn't cope with it. Things booked out quickly. The airlines cancelled flights. Transit hubs closed. It's I can see that we're not the only ones that have been caught out by this. We were at Vietnam Airlines the other day, and they've, as I said, they've been really, really good. But there was a young English guy there, and he'd been teaching in Hanoi, and he'd received an email from his embassy and advising him that there was flights back to the UK, and the UK government was subsidising it. So he was quite excited when he told us that's his reason. And then we got called up, and we were talking to the person helping us, and then he got called up, and he was sitting next to us, and we heard them tell him that they don't know anything about those flights, and they're really sorry, but he'll just have to wait. And he was really upset, but there's nothing he can do. We also received a similar email from our embassy advising us that there was a flight from Vietnam Airlines a week ago, and quick, you can get on this flight, blah blah blah. But we couldn't, because we needed to connect in with Ho Chi Minh, and we couldn't get a flight to Ho Chi Minh. There was absolutely no flights to Ho Chi Minh, so we couldn't catch the flight from Ho Chi Minh to Australia. So another one I saw, we walked past a hotel one day, and there was a German girl, and she's just crying. She's sitting at a laptop crying with her hands, her head in her hands. Just awful. And I said to her, is there anything I can do to help? And she said that she had booked her flight for Germany, but it kept getting cancelled, and that was the last one, and she didn't know what she was going to do. So I suggested to her that the German embassy is quite big here in Hanoi, and it was still during business hours, and I said it'd be a good idea to contact them and talk to them over the phone, and tell them that you're really distressed and that you need a bit of help, in your situation. And that's what she did. So that's the real situation here, and I'm a positive person. I try to keep upbeat in this situation. Am I stressed? Yeah, absolutely. But I think you have to put all that aside if you want to function properly. I think you have to not resist all these challenges that are thrown at you or what's happening in the environment. You have to go with the flow, because if you resist, you just make things more difficult. If you just open yourself up to accept, okay, this is how it is. What can I do? What plan can I make? Paul and I had always planned that if we're unable to get an international flight, that we would continue. We would go to Dalat, because Dalat is hasn't had any cases of the coronavirus, and we would spend time there until we were able to secure an international flight. But of course, you know, all the provinces have closed down, and you can't move between them, which I understand. That makes sense. So that plan's gone. So now we face looking for another plan, and I guess we'll, as our last video said about hunkering down in Hanoi, we're still here in this apartment for over a week. If our flight doesn't go as planned on Thursday, I'm really hoping that it does, but if it doesn't, we'll be here for longer, and then we'll have to, you know, look at the situation then. And who knows, if, you know, there may be some flights available. My understanding is there are a lot of people here that haven't been able to get flights back to their home country. You know, when we received that phone call from Qatar, and we walked nearly 2 k's or 1.5 kilometres or something to the Qatar office, and it was closed. And we're coming back, and Paul said that he needed some credit for his phone, and I said, okay, we better go to the Vinmart, which is like a 7-Eleven, you know, convenience store. So we went to the convenience store to get the credit, and we thought we'd better get enough, because we're going to have to actually call Qatar to, you know, so this will be an international call, and we'll probably be on hold for a while. So we bought $200,000 worth of phone credit, and it was quite difficult because even though we did our little trick of putting it into Google Translate that we wanted phone credit for $200,000, I don't think the young boy that was serving us was able to read that or understand that. So I asked another customer, there was a gentleman that was maybe about 40 years old, and I said, do you speak English? And he said, oh, little. And I showed him the message, and he understood, and he told the guy. So that was all fine. He loaded up the credit, and that was 200,000. And then Paul looks in his wallet, and he has like 18,000 dong, not 200. And we're thinking, oh no. So we said, okay, we'll give him our visa. And so we gave him the visa, and he said, no, we don't take that. And we went, oh, okay, and asked for an ATM. He pointed to an ATM across the road so we can take some money out. We walked across the road. The ATM wouldn't take our card. Or there was a problem with it. So with the ATM. So we came back, and we're standing outside the convenience store. Meanwhile, they have Paul's phone because it's got the credit on it, but he hasn't paid for it. So we're standing outside with my phone, trying to look up where there is another ATM, and the man inside called us in, and then he had a conversation with the young boy about why he wouldn't take our Visa card because it has Visa on the door, and they had a bit of a conversation about that, and I don't know what happened, but they wouldn't take it. And then this man, he had money in his hand, and he took out 200,000, he put it on the counter. And I said, oh no, you know, Paul and I both said, no, you don't have to do that. We'll find another ATM, that's fine. And he said, no, it's fine. You know, and he's like this, and he's going, it's fine. I thought, wow, you know, $200,000, 200,000 dong, that's a lot of money, you know, here especially. It's 200,000 dong would be, I don't know, maybe $14 Australian. But, you know, certainly in Vietnam, $14 can buy you a lot of stuff, a lot of food at the supermarket, or petrol for your scooter, maybe for 3-6 months worth, who knows. But it's a lot of money. And so I ran out the store to thank him, and he had got on his motorbike and driven away. But I just thought, wow, you know, people are so kind. Since we've been here, everyone has been so kind. You know, places we've stayed, they've brought us plates of food. They send messages about is there anything you need? You know, all sorts of things like that. So, which is really kind. And I think during this time more than ever, it makes me think the importance, you know, of being kind to people, importance of being positive. You know, trying to be positive, and you can still function. You know, because at the end of the day, letting the stress overwhelm you and the worry overwhelm you, you won't make good decisions that way. it's always better to be calm and, you know, try and work out a bit of a plan when things feel like they're just not working the way they should. There's a lot of people in this situation, and I really feel for them, because I would never, someone like me who has travelled a fair bit and is very much a planner, I would never have thought that we'd find ourselves in a situation like this. But, you know, when we started our holiday, nobody would have guessed that the coronavirus would have taken off from China and affected the whole world the way that it did. There was no mention of that at all. As I said, things were like normal. So, you know, I guess there's, you know, that's our situation now, and I just wanted to share that with you. I really hope that our next video will be a bit more upbeat, and that it will be from Hanoi Airport on Thursday night, or even an update from Doha when we're in transit. Definitely not looking forward to a long transit, and I hope that we do get that transit, shorter one, and go to Perth. But, you know, whatever happens, you know, so long as we can get a flight, because the alternative, the way it looks at the moment, is that we could be, you know, in Vietnam for an indefinite period. And whilst that's not a problem, it doesn't seem, the Vietnam government has been very good about the visa situation, all of that. You know, nobody wants to be away from home indefinitely if that was not their plan. So fingers crossed, and, you know, I hope that your health is good, and the people around you, it's good. I can see that we're getting, you know, a lot of views from all over the world now, which is really great to see. And I hope that, you know, our funny little videos can pass some time while you're also maybe in quarantine or isolated or shut down, or maybe not feeling so good about the situation. I hope that, you know, watching our video makes you feel a bit better. So we'll see you on the next one. Bye.